Hey, so welcome back. We're finally getting these mindfulness sessions started. So I hope that you grab you a pen today, a notebook, label it mindfulness, and just sit and rock out with me today. I'm not going to start at the beginning of this book because I really want to work us through this book together, and I'm already into chapter 5. And so I think that sometimes it's just better to just kind of jump right in. We'll go back periodically and I will provide you with the basic concepts of mindfulness and to really exploring those emotions and things. But I do think that today we're just going to jump right into loss. So yesterday I began talking about loss, and I had posted a few things up on my social media on Instagram and some of my Facebook stories. And so I was just really asking you, what losses have you experienced, and try to give a little bit of background information on loss and maybe our perception of it. So we're going to be working out of the mindfulness workbook. So if you know anybody who struggles with staying present, has issues with anxiety, depression, just really want to learn how to learn some real life skills, those that suffer from addiction as well, grab them, tell them to turn this video on, watch this video. And the goal is to apply as much as information as you can, because that is how we store it in our long-term memory, is being able to apply it as we get it. So without further ado, we're going to get into loss. So I'm going to read you a little bit out of this book because I like that this book gives a lot of context about it. Kind of really brings stories to life. It's very vivid. If you want, I will drop the link for the book down at the bottom so that you have it with you as well. So we're just going to get right into it. So I'm going to read this passage first. And this passage says, imagine that your life is big, extraordinary, this big extraordinary mansion filled with many rooms. Each room is more beautiful than the next. There are rooms for hosting parties, rooms for working, rooms for lounging. There are bedrooms with views and bathrooms with jacuzzi tubs. Everyone in your rooms, life is clean and bright and filled with all your favorite things. You can move freely through each room, enjoying the sight, the smells, and the colors. This is what it's like at the beginning of your life. But slowly and quietly, things begin to happen. Inside your house, loss has come. It has visited you many times. It's shown up in many forms, not just death, as you will see, but in the form of lost friendships, lost jobs, lost trust through betrayals. With each loss came a strong emotions that you believe were intolerable and that you tried to dodge. Not wanting these feelings to disrupt your life, you tried to push them away. It was as each loss got pushed away into a room in your beautiful home. You boarded up the windows, turned off the lights, and locked the door. And you locked out the loss somewhere. Over the course of your life, you may have surrendered the space to dozens of these darkened, hidden rooms. And little by little, entire wings and floors of your beautiful house have now been shut down and boarded up. Parts of your life, of your very self, were locked away. By now, you may be confined in one tiny room. With a mansion full of locked rooms all around you, and you dare not enter. One of the goals is to begin to enter into these locked rooms, leaving you finally able to move freely around your life and experience all that it has to offer without bumping into a locked door with so much pain behind it. Imagine the grieving process as your way of entering each room and clearing out the cobwebs, dusting the furniture, and sweeping the floors. Through mindfulness and other skills that you're going to be learning in this workbook and through attending this class, you will find that the windows of each room of your beautiful house, you will bring in fresh air, fresh sunlight into once dark spaces. To get to that place of freedom, you will have to do some work. You will have to already have made it through the first part of this book to keep you committed to yourself. So that's why I said we're going to go back a little bit, but we're going to start here so that you can dive right in. So what is loss? So I hope that really brought some insight to what grief looks like, what what emotions look like when we shut them in instead of allowing them to flow, right? When you think about your life and you being born, right? It's kind of like that mansion that it describes, and you have this fresh start and everything is pretty bright, and then the more you go through life and the more you experience things, you begin to feel the body with grief and with loss and with pain and despair, and we try to walk through life as if those things are not happening, or as if those things have not happened. And sometimes we don't even know that they happen, and they're living in our bodies, causing us tension and things like that. So this is what we're going to get into. So what is loss? And y'all make sure you leave me your comment down at the bottom. I want you to really tell me what your definition of loss is, because as we understand, we are indoctrined into our understanding of life itself. That comes from our parents. That comes from our community leaders, church, other adults, anything that has been an impression on you that you've seen. You are a sum total of those experiences. You are a sum total of that information. I know that they throwing around the word like AI, artificial intelligence stuff, but listen, shit's not artificial, okay? Artificial intelligence is nothing but a sum total of the world's thoughts, the world's knowledge. Anything that we've put into this cloud, into this computer, keep in mind these are things that's coming out of our heads. And so it's not artificial. It's just the fact that now you have access to everybody's IQ. And so keep in mind, those are the things that shape us. And so when I say indoctrinated, for those who don't know what that is, that means that we're typically told what to think and not how to think. And so the way we process pain, or the way we process loss, or the way we feel like being happy, that is shown to us and told to us at a very young age. And we turn around and we model the behavior. So really, without a free thought and being able to formulate how you really feel and how you really process things, that is what is artificial. Is that we may be experiencing life through our parents' eyes, or we may be self-medicating because we've seen our parents do that. We may be quote unquote healing ourselves by withdrawing from life because we've seen our parents or somebody significant in our life do that. That's not our own thought. That's not our own thought. And so we want to get back to a little bit more of learning how to think for ourselves and learning how to feel things. And that is all going to come through going back and relearning what you think you know, experiencing in things for the first time, and then applying that to your life and moving forward. Now you have a new way of looking at things. You went in these rooms and you've done the dusting and you cleaned the cobwebs, and now you have this new cycle of life that consists of thoughts and feelings and those things that are shaped by you and not somebody else. So, what is loss? So, a little early on in this chapter, we'll find a list of many kinds of losses. So I do have the worksheet on that. So it's likely at first glance that this list won't make sense. So we'll get into this part before I show you the list. That's because you probably didn't consider experiences to be losses when they happened. You knew that you were in pain, and you maybe have even felt upside down somehow, but the word loss probably didn't come to mind. Again, we're taught what loss is. So unless you are retaught and you re-experience and are retold, your definition of loss may only be associated with death. Even death in itself, though, we're taught what death is. And that varies from culture to culture. So, That is because this is pretty unique of the way of seeing things. Most of the time, when you hear the word loss, you think of death. But truth is that in the course of your life, there are many significant losses. Here's a good way to start defining loss. Think of loss as any time when you said goodbye to something. Whether it was you saying goodbye to a relationship, whether it was you saying goodbye to a house that you grew up when you was young, a school that you went to, a baseball team that you once played baseball with. You have maybe even been forced to say goodbye to your innocence at a very young age. Someone or something have maybe stolen your childhood from you. That's loss. All those are loss. That's heavy and an angry monster of loss. You may have even said goodbye to a marriage, a child who was going off to kindergarten, or even the child that turned around and went off to college after they completed all those years. Maybe you said goodbye to a job that you had that you loved. You had to relocate town. Maybe you had your heart set on a new job and you had to say goodbye as you hoped that the phone would ring, but it never rang. So that opportunity, a lost opportunity. All of these experiences have hit you as losses. Even if you didn't know it, they've triggered you in this very mourning response that you probably didn't even acknowledge. Because in reality, I'm thinking if you didn't acknowledge it, 9 times out of 10 is because we don't have funerals for things like that. So when you think about loss, you associate that with a funeral or something that follows, right? A specific type of mourning. There's not even bereavement days for, I'm pretty sure they have them now for a loss of a pet. Nevertheless, there's no bereavement day for you, working at a job for 20 years and having to leave. You don't get that. So, and even with the most significant loss, you get 3 days off work and then you need to come back to work. Okay. So they're triggered by mourning responses that you probably didn't even know and acknowledge as loss because, hey, who has a funeral to say goodbye to a childhood home? Who gets friends together to mourn the death of a marriage? A lot of times that we see those parties and somebody's having a divorce party, and in reality, it may look like it's super fun, right? But in reality, that is trying to mark a pivotal moment of loss, a pivotal moment of death. I think it's important that we understand that death indicates the ending of a cycle, to begin something, to end something old, to begin something new. And so when we think about the word loss and we think about the word death, the two typically run hand in hand, right? You're never going to experience something new without first experiencing, without first allowing something old to die off, right? When you think about, so let's put this in perspective a little bit. A toddler, a baby has to say goodbye to being a baby before it becomes a toddler. And before the kid becomes I don't know what you call them, little kids, I don't know. But after the age of being a toddler, those toddler ways have to die off, right? So you having the bottle, you being in the crib, you being carried around, things like that. Do you not think that these kids don't go through distress? We see it. It's not what we call it, though. It's not what we call it. Now, the caveat to that is, when you liken this to addiction, as adults, we don't like change. Therefore, when we end up doing some things that we don't have no business doing, like drugs, alcohol, shiesty behaviors, addictive behaviors like that, we have these withdrawals that we tend to not be able to manage. Yet the baby was able to manage that amount of distress that they was in when we took the bottle away. The baby is able to withstand the amount of distress when we had to take the pacifier away. Those are the same type of dependencies that we have and we see in addiction. That when it comes to loss, that you're going to experience some pain. You're going to experience a sense of mourning when you're saying hello to something new and goodbye to something old. So, why is it important to look at old losses? So, it's important to look at old losses. Let me see. It's important to look at old losses because when we're revisiting old losses, we have to understand that we have to heal from them. The thing is that loss compounds loss. So a lot of times, again, we're losing the bottle. We're losing the autonomy, right? We're losing the ability for our parents to care for us as we're moving through these stages of life. And so we're not considering any of those things a loss until we get to be 18 years old. And then all of a sudden you've lost a lot of people that would even be asking you how well are you doing, who actually is going to offer you or who is responsible for offering you something in return if you tell me that you're not doing good. So we move, once we become these adults, we move into this space where nobody really gives a fuck. Really, nobody really cares. And so this is why it's important that we begin to mitigate our losses and we begin to think about them a little bit more, because loss after loss after loss, if loss compounds loss, then we're going to equal, what does that equal? Right? If I add loss plus loss, I get more loss. If I multiply loss times loss, I'm going to get more loss. So the losses build on themselves, as if the old wound simply covered up with a new thin layer of scarring, to only reopen as soon as another loss hits, and then begins throbbing and bleeding all over again. Lasting recovery requires healing at the source. So most of the times we're going to this surface level and we're trying to fix what's on the surface level, when in reality we need to get to the source of things. We need to get to the root of the matter. So, as you just read, it's possible for some of us, for most of the significant loss occurred in childhood. Most of our significant loss occurred in childhood. By the time you become an adult, either you're used to losing, so your mindset of losing, it has either molded you to put everything in, throw the kitchen sink in, I'm going to win at all of this, and or has provided you with a sense of terror and fear. And those self-thoughts are reoccurring thoughts that I don't know why I'm going to do it, I'm just going to lose it anyway. I don't know why I'm going to do this, I'm going to lose it anyway. So there's two extremes, right? One person's going all the way in because they are so scared to be in the situation again of losing something again that they're willing to do anything and everything they're willing to take chances that are not always so good, just because they are fear of losing. And then you have another person who is completely frightened and frozen in a state of fear because of the loss, that they can't move. We always want to be in the middle in life. We want to find the middle. And the middle person, well, somehow they have built some and went and got some resilience. Maybe they watched some movies or somebody else's stories about loss. Maybe they went out and did their own research about, what it's going to take for them to get one foot ahead. Maybe they've put in the work and they've done the work so that they are able to operate in the middle, because that is where we have to be, in the middle. Okay. So it says early trauma and abuse can take many forms. Each form is a thief, stealing away calm, security, happiness that every child is entitled to. If you experience trauma in your early years, you suffered heartbreak losses, loss of safety, loss of self-esteem, loss of trust, loss of faith in the world around you. Young and fragile at that time, you didn't really have the ability to work through some of these losses. You couldn't heal from them like you needed to. So these are the very things that we find that show up in adult life. One of your most important tasks is now to go back to heal the old wounds. The only reason why we go back to the past, y'all, is to go and problem solve. If we're not problem solving, then you better be going back there to just get a memory so that you can reminisce for a minute and then bring it back presently. Because when we live in the past for too long, well, there's things back there that we like and there's things back there we don't like. Nevertheless, you're going to run into both. And so we want to go back and we want to problem solve. So we got to go and examine these wounds and figure out how those wounds are affecting today in the present. Guess what? Because the person who can control the past controls the present. The person that can control the present controls the future. Okay? So you have the power now to help that little kid, right? That experienced that loss of safety, that loss of self-esteem, that loss of trust, that loss of faith, that loss of life, right? You get to go back and you get to save this person so that you can grieve. You're going to confront and move through these losses in your life. And in doing so, you'll take away the power from many of the negative behaviors that have fostered themselves in you, or the negative thoughts that has fostered themselves in your mind and became reoccurring self-doubting thoughts, negative thought patterns that shaped you and followed you for a while. So I read Christina's story yesterday. That was one of the things that I did so that we would have kind of like a jump start in this video. So to sum Christina's story up, who realized all the losses that she had in her life? And I'll just highlight a little bit, but Christina's father was an alcoholic who was very abusive to her mother, and Christina basically found her safety up underneath her bed. So she used to crawl into this small little space, and in that space she had a few things that made her feel comfortable. She used her stuffed animal as a pillow, and she would hide there, and she hid there not only until the relationship between her and her mom dissipated and ended up in divorce, but she continued to stay there until they actually moved out of the house. So moving forward, that was her adverse childhood experience that she experienced, so not only was probably the loss of relationship with her father because he was so abusive to mom, right? But the loss of the security that maybe he did provide when he wasn't drunk, right? The loss of that connection and whatever connection that they had, even the loss of dysfunction. People mourn loss of dysfunction. Doesn't matter how safe you feel. Becomes your normal. It becomes your normal. So even though he moved out the house, it was still a loss. And then she lost her parents being married. So that is a lot of loss that she experienced even being a young age. Nevertheless, she ended up being this successful lawyer and ultimately got divorced herself. She ended up being in an accident. So there's more loss. She lost her husband. She lost her marriage, right? She lost the connection that maybe she had when developing that connection to her husband. Then she ended up in a car wreck, and she had back problems, which means that she lost some of her mobility as well, maybe even her autonomy. So she lost some of that. Within a few months, she was addicted on painkillers that the doctor had prescribed her for the pain in her back. Her work began suffering, so she lost out on some work. Her friendships were becoming strained and distant, so now she's lost out on her socialism or her ability to talk with her friends, her ability to be at work. There's more loss. Terrified and overwhelmed, she went to therapy. And during therapy, she was asked to take a look at her losses. That is when Christina began to make the connections that her own divorce had kind of triggered many painful memories from her childhood. Now, she felt like that she had put those thoughts behind her. But the truth is, she actually felt embarrassed. She was back in the situation that she had suffered so much loss from earlier in her life. Right? So it says that she, that when her husband ended up moving out that night, she ended up sleeping in the guest bedroom. That guest bedroom happened to be the smallest room in her home, much like a closet. Well, she regressed back to being a child and being up underneath that bed because that is where her safe place was. So the ending of the story basically just suggests that she didn't want to come out of that hiding place. However, the pills that she became addicted to became even a smaller place for her to hide in. So now she was hiding behind the pills, self-medicating, using those pills to help her deal with her issues of loss. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm sure that there's some ways that you can relate to the loss that Christina felt in that story. Not even thinking about your own loss, but really just thinking about Christina's loss and the amount of loss that's only one facet of her life. And that happened to be her dad, and then her relationship. I don't necessarily know. It doesn't really cover the rest of Christina's life, but I can only imagine the other amount of loss, like the friends, the moving to a different place, the moving to a different job, going from college, those things all compounded, loss after loss after loss after loss. Never taking the time out to think about it. Never taking the time out to talk about it. Just keep moving like nothing's wrong. I think that's what we all do, right? And then at some point we begin to self-medicate, and whatever that looks like and whatever practice that is for you. Self-medicating is basically negative reinforcement. You're doing something to escape something else. I'm going to do something to escape something else. I'm going to escape how I really feel instead of really being able to talk about how you feel. Going back and understand and gaining a better understanding of where these thoughts come from, where these ways of behaviors and thinking root at. Right? So now it's time for us to take a look at our losses. It's likely that the strong feelings are coming up for you right now, even thinking about revisiting old painful experiences from your life that make you feel very anxious, probably. It may be your instinct to avoid this chapter altogether, and you may offer up things like, this is silly. I don't even understand what we're doing here. But believe it or not, you've got some losses. So I'm going to go through some of this worksheet that has these losses on here. So, loss of job, just count on your hands. Loss of job, unemployed, quit a job, promotion, parents split up or divorce, miscarriage, infertility, abortion, gave a baby up for adoption, was given up for adoption yourself, loss of reputation, unrequited love, breakup of an important romantic relationship, death of a pet, having to give a pet away, military deployment, arrest, time in jail, time in prison, mental illness and psychotic breaks, psychiatric treatment as an inpatient, drug and alcohol treatment, severe depression, suicidal thoughts, feeling of loss of hope, graduating from high school, graduating from college, spiritual crisis, mastectomy, loss of a limb, chronic illness, hearing loss, loss of sound, being betrayed, lied to, a friend moving away, aging, loss of organ or joint, loss of a driver's license, homelessness, moving into a new house, moving into a new town or city, a new state, different country, foreign language, losing your home, loss of virginity, loss of sexual interest, aging, impotence, addiction of a parent, mental illness, absent father, absent mother, discharge from military, abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, loss of a dream, large financial loss, sexual trauma, physical assault, trauma from a natural disaster, combat, death of a close friend, your father, the death of your mother, father, death of your grandparents, a sibling, leaving your home, death of a spouse, death of your child leaving home for college. I'm sure that you can think of a few more that are definitely that are personal to you. Right? And I'm almost sure that most people could probably have named at least 5 or 6 or 7 of these and check these off the list, never really identifying these as loss. There's no grieving process. You mad. Doesn't mean you're going to do nothing about you mad. Maybe you didn't drink a little bit. Didn't solve the problem though. Right? It compounded on the stress that you already have. The things that's already going on in your life. So, exploring the impact of our losses is important to us, because without exploring our losses, then we put ourselves in position to continue to just create more loss and experience more loss that compounds on each other and makes it more difficult to appreciate life on life's terms in today. So we're going to pick back up